It's a beautiful day. We're out for a walk in Cobham and I feel like reminiscing. Do you remember back in 1991 when we were working on the US sitcom Married with Children?
Oh God, yeah, do I?
It was about a 5-week shoot, wasn't it?
Well, for me, it was about 2 months with all the setting up and all the negotiations, yeah.
So Married with Children, for those of you who don't know, was a very, very popular US sitcom back in I suppose it started in the 80s and went through to the early 90s. I don't really know how long it ran for. And the stars on it were, oh God, what was his name? Ed Bundy. That's not his real name, is it?
No,
that was the character.
The Bundy family.
The Bundy family. So there was Christina Applegate and David Faustino were the kids. And then Kathy Siegel. I think she was Kathy Siegel.
I cannot remember.
And he was, oh God, he's so well known. Was he Ed?
Ed was the character name.
Was he not Ed anyway?
He could have been, yeah. I don't know.
Well, that's a good start. Hang on. I've just had to Google that. Ed O'Neill, he was an Ed.
Oh, God.
So he was the father. And it was a very popular sitcom. It was a comedy. It probably wouldn't do well these days because it was quite simplistic, but it was fun. And the plot was that the family, I think they won a trip to England for some reason.
That's right, yeah.
I don't remember now.
That's the storyline.
Yeah. So they came to England, the whole crew.
They were looking for their ancestors.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, they were looking for their ancestors. So the whole crew, the whole cast, they all came to England and set up camp in the Royal Garden Hotel in London for
Kensington.
Over a month. And you were the location or production manager?
Both.
Both. Location manager, production manager. I was the runner. Obviously a bit of nepotism going on there because I think I got the job thanks to you.
That's true.
So what did you have to do for that show?
Well, let me go back to this. I got a colleague of mine who I'd worked with in London at Chelsea when we had the studio on the King's Road. He'd moved to America and eventually became a lighting director. And he was working on the show in Hollywood or in Los Angeles, wherever it was. And he called me one day. He said, "We're doing this show. They want to do a couple of scenes in London. Can you set it up?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I can." So some days later, 3 or 4 people, 2 producers, director, and I can't remember who else, the financial man, arrived from the States, and I met them in a hotel down in Piccadilly, and they described what they wanted. They wanted the scene of the Bundys arriving in London. They weren't too sure exactly what because they hadn't got the script. I think a couple of months later when they called me and said, "We got a script, we'll send it to you and it will obviously have the locations on, see if you can set it all up. We'll bring the crew and the cast over." When I got this script, I realised there were about 12 locations, which was a lot more than the original 1 or 2 they discussed at our first meeting. I set it up and it took a couple of months to get all the contracts for the locations, permits from the police and so on. And our very first day of filming was in Savile Row in London.
Yeah.
Where Ed was coming over to get measured up for a suit. And
we went to a very, very old established tailor's shop.
Henry Poole, the tailor, which is still there. And he actually got a suit measured up, which I'm sure the production paid for. But Henry Poole and Sons, famous, one of the oldest tailors in Savile Row. And the next day, they wanted to do a scene in Hyde Park where they went on the Serpentine. They had a boat and they were in the boat. I don't remember the context of what they were doing. And it took me 2 weeks of negotiations to get the trucks to take all our equipment into Hyde Park. It was a bit of a nightmare. We weren't allowed to have the trucks move down the road at the side of the Serpentine. They had to be parked over by Knightsbridge and all the equipment carried. And we were shooting this scene and it was getting rather fraught to say the least, because they weren't getting the shots they wanted. And I got a call from, I can't remember who gave me the call to say, do you know your truck's on fire? And the truck that they'd parked over the night which had caught fire. And of course all the London fire engine, it was just awful. We got the shots we needed, and some months later I got a letter from the authorities in Hyde Park to say as long as I lived I would never be allowed to film again in Hyde Park. I was forbidden.
Banned
for
from
life.
Hyde Park for life. Well, I remember that day because I was on runner duties, which basically means tea and coffee, and at one point they sent me off with a wad of money and said go and get teas and coffees and donuts for everybody, and there was 50 people on set, and I didn't really know what to do. I was only 17, and I sort of wandered out of Hyde Park. I found a McDonald's and I went in there and I said, please can I have 30 cups of coffee, 20 cups of tea and 50 donuts? Are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. He said, how are you going to carry all this? And I went, oh, I don't know. And I think I ended up running back to Hyde Park and finding Dad and asking if I could, how I was going to do it. And he said, just get a taxi. The taxi will do it. So I had to go back to McDonald's, order again, flag down a black taxi driver, ask him if he would stop outside McDonald's and wait while I loaded up all the teas and coffees and donuts, and then very carefully drive them to the entrance of Hyde Park, where me and then another runner had to run back and forth bringing all these teas and coffees. And they were on little trays at 4 at a time, so it just took absolutely forever. It was the most laborious, expensive, ridiculous job, and by the time everybody got their drinks they were stone cold. So we did lots and lots of different shoots all around London in various places. I remember the London Dungeon, a nightclub.
Heathrow Airport we hired for the day.
Yeah,
Harrods, we opened up Harrods on a Sunday.
Harrods on a Sunday. We had Harrods to ourselves on a Sunday. That was amazing. All sorts of things. And then eventually we moved off to the Kent countryside, near Ashted, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were going to Chilham Castle down in Kent. And they wanted to go to their ancestral home in the script and see where their forebears came from. So we spent a couple of days setting up in Chilham, and they closed off the village for us. So a lot of tourists go there. It's a pretty village. They closed off the village, and it was over Easter. It was a Good Friday through to Monday, yeah. And when we'd gone there on the original, looking at the location I'd taken them there, they said we want to go down in the valley. There's a lovely road going down into a valley, but we want it to be full of fog.
Oh yeah.
It was going to be a foggy day because they get lost in the fog. So I called the special effects people at Pinewood prior to getting there and explained what I wanted. They said, yeah, we can arrange that. We can put fog wherever you want it, fog or snow, whatever you want. I said, well, all we need is fog. So on the day, it was Easter Monday, we got all the cast down there, and this truck arrives from Pinewood, a couple of guys in it, and they said, where do you want the fog? So we said, in the valley here. So they switched on this machine, and the fog came out, and for 2 hours you couldn't see anything. It was just laying there. It didn't
move. I remember lots of hanging around waiting that day. I think I've got quite a few photos of that day.
And they kept saying, can't you move the fog? I said, I don't think Jesus can move the fog. So anyhow.
Oh, and they had all those, I can't remember what the plot was, but there was a whole pile of rifles, like big long rifles, like hunting rifles. And they were rubber, they weren't real. Oh, yes. And there was a little boy on set. I don't know whether he was somebody's son or whether he was part of the cast. I don't remember. He was about 4. And he'd found these rifles. And this little boy was walking around all day with this huge rifle, about 3 times his size. And I can remember people being quite worried seeing him with it. It was quite funny.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting shoot.
I think the thing I remember most vividly was, I remember lots of it, but the party at the end. So there was the wrap party in the hotel where everyone had been staying, and it was all free food and drink. And about 2 hours before the party, the two makeup artists kidnapped me. They came and knocked on my door, kidnapped me, dragged me off to their room and gave me a complete makeover. I mean, I was 17, I had no idea how to do my hair, I had no idea about makeup. I just was too young at the time, I wasn't interested in any of that. And they obviously looked at me and thought, well, what a state she is, let's try and sort her out. And so they put my hair in rollers and they gave me a full face of makeup, and they didn't let me see until they'd finished. So I got the whole sort of surprise reveal at the end. And for me, it was the most amazing transformation. I couldn't believe what I looked like. I was absolutely fascinated by it. I was so surprised that I could look like that. And I felt so confident that night. I put on a little dress and a little green denim jacket and went off to the party and proceeded to get very drunk. And all I really remember is at one point with all the other youngsters, so it was me, Christina Applegate, David Faustino, Christina's boyfriend, David's best friend or friend who was over at the time. We got jumped in a car and we got taken to, I think they were all staying at a different hotel, and it was a very posh, beautiful like manor house hotel. And we went there and we all changed. I remember Christina giving me a pair of tracksuit bottoms and a pair of trainers, and we all changed into like normal clothes and went off roaming around the Kent countryside in the middle of the night. And we got very, very lost, and we also got split up. Me and Christina lost the boys, they went off somewhere. We ended up in this, I think it was like an abandoned roofless church or something. It was this abandoned building with no roof, and it was terrifying. And I think she fell over and she was convinced she was covered in blood. In the end, we found out it was mud, not blood. Couldn't find the boys. We could hear weird noises. We were convinced we were being chased by devils. I mean, absolute chaos. We eventually, about 4 or 5 in the morning, I think we found our way back to the boys and got back to the hotel. And it was far too late for me to get a cab back to my hotel. So I ended up, I think, passing out in Christina's room. I woke up in the morning feeling very sorry for myself. And that was the day that everybody was leaving. So I woke up that morning. I think they had this lady who was like their caretaker.
Yes, the chaperone.
Yes, the chaperone, that was it. And she came in, she knocked on the door that morning. She must have known we'd been out. She came in with a packet of paracetamol, bottles of water for everybody, sent me on my way. And that was it. That was the end of the shoot. But it was a great evening.
Yeah, and we had at one time 500 extras on it on the jousting.
The jousting, yeah.
We had there was
a whole medieval thing going on. I remember that. Yeah.
Horses and jousters and a crowd of 500.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and that was I think that was my first proper paid job as a runner, where I was earning, I think, probably like, it was either £50 a day or £80 a day.
It was a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah, and every now and again I'd be just handed wads of money and told to go and buy something, and there was quite a lot of money left over.
And I think one of the things was a lovely thing. They wanted to do the arrival very quickly. They wanted to do the arrival at Heathrow, coming into England ready for the show, and I managed to hire the whole of Terminal 2 for the whole night.
Yes.
With half the restaurants open, so we could use it for catering. And they closed the airport at midnight. We moved in, and they didn't open it till 7 in the morning. We shot throughout the night.
Yes.
The whole airport, wherever we wanted.
We had the whole airport, and I remember being very, very sick that night because somebody gave me a caffeine tablet to take, and at the time I didn't realise that I was intolerant to caffeine, and I took 2. Oh, I've never been so ill in my life. It was horrendous. And being ill and being stuck in an airport. I think I remember at one point lying down on the baggage carousel because it was like the only flat thing I could find to lie on. I was horrible. That was not a fun evening.
That was Married to Children.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I never saw any of them ever again.
No, I never saw them again either.